component of Tier 1 intervention is physical setting. Physical setting is very important because it's the first sign to your students that they are safe in your classroom and that they are ready to learn. Now, today with us we have Carole Weinstein, who wrote the book Secondary Classroom Management. We are so proud to have her here today. Carole, can you tell us about yourself?
Sure. Well, my name is Dr. Carole Weinstein. I have my PhD and my master's degree from Harvard College of Education. And for the past several years, I've been studying classroom management and how that affects teacher effectiveness and how teachers accomplish their goals through the way they manage their classroom.
Wow, well that is exactly what we are talking about in this web series.
Wonderful. I'm so happy to be here to help.
Well, what do you think the most important part of physical setting is?
For me, the most important part of physical setting, obviously, is the physical security of your students. Your students need to know that they are in a safe place, and this is especially important in classes such as home economics or science or woodworking, where your students will come into contact with several dangerous things. And another thing to keep in mind is your students with disabilities that are often wheelchair bound or have leg braces. A classroom that you and I can navigate very successfully will be very hard for a student in a wheelchair. So you need to keep these things in mind when you're arranging the physical setting of your classroom.
Wonderful. Carole, could you tell us the main components of classroom setting?
Sure thing, Whitney. The 6 functions of classroom setting are security and shelter, social contact, symbolic identification, task instrumentality, pleasure, and growth.
Wow. Well, what do you think is the most important?
For me, as I said earlier, security is really important, but I think it's very important that you keep in mind the social contact that your students need, and that goes along with psychological security, which is another aspect to cover in my book. But you do need to make sure that your students have appropriate social contact, so they're interacting with their peers in a way that is healthy and safe for them as they go throughout their educational career.
Certainly. Well, thank you very much for being here with us today, Carole.
Thank you, Whitney.
So that was really interesting what Carole told us.
Yeah, Carole seems like a really interesting lady.
She does. One of the most interesting things I thought she said was about how the classroom setting can create a safe environment for your kids.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really important that your kids are safe and secure in the environment that they're trying to learn in.
How do you think that we could make our classroom a safe environment?
Well, I think one of the ways we can keep our kids really safe is to have a motivational surrounding.
That's true. Like, we could put posters up that say that it's a safe zone, and we could put information about ourselves so that our students feel more comfortable with us.
And I think it would be also beneficial if we became Safe Zone certified. Right?
Yes.
I also think it's really important to keep the rules and regulations of your classroom posted around the room. Inserted here are a couple examples we've seen during our time observing in the Starkville School District.
As you can see, many of the examples that we show here are very fun and creative. Rules don't have to be boring. They may set strict guidelines for your classroom, but your students will be much more likely to follow them if they are presented in a clear, concise, fun, and colorful manner.
One thing I've seen recently while observing is that there's a movement to put your objectives for each day on the board. And I think that's very beneficial, but you need to make sure that you do change your objectives and that they're written in language that your students can understand and not teacher language.
That's really important, Whitney, because our number one goal is to make sure that our students are secure and safe and understand everything that's going on around them in their surrounding areas,
so that they can become active participants in their learning. Speaking of which, a great example is to have students create their physical environment.
That sounds awesome, Whitney. Actually, do you remember at the beginning of the semester when Dr. Ricardo asked us how we wanted our classroom arranged?
I do remember that.
I think that's an excellent teaching tool because it allows the students to become the masters of their own classroom while working within your parameters as a teacher.
Too often we think that we as teachers know what our students need without listening to our students' actual needs. Carole Weinstein also said that it's important about social interaction, how your students can interact with each other and how they can interact with you as the teacher. So how do you think that you might positively set up your classroom?
For me personally, I'm a social studies education major, which means a lot of my class time will be spent either lecturing or in group discussion. So what I would really like to do is set up my room in sort of a half circle so I can have full access to all of my students and all of my students can have full access to me, and there's no who's in front or who's behind. There's a whole equal playing field between all of us.
Yes.
What about you?
Well, as an English education major, I think that it's very important to be able to change the way that my kids come into the room, because sometimes we'll be writing essays and sometimes we need to facilitate a really awesome discussion. So my plan, personally, before I'm in the classroom, and it might change, is to have a changing setup so that my kids, when they come in the room, they know exactly what they're going to do that day, whether it's in group work or as individuals working on their own.
That's really important, Whitney. It's really important for our students to know what they're coming into at the beginning of the day.
It definitely goes into making a safe learning environment.
So in conclusion, when it comes to physical setting, it's really important that you have a safe and secure physical environment for your students to do lots and lots of active learning in. We hope you enjoyed this brief introduction to physical setting. If you'd like to learn more about it, feel free to read Carole Weinstein's Secondary Classroom Management, available on Amazon and at your local library.
Link in the doobly-doo.
The next video in our series is going to be on rules and procedures. If you'd like to click here, it will take you to the next video, and we hope you enjoy that one just as much as you enjoyed this one.